This is the Cynefin Framework, pronounced Cynefin, for those of you who don't speak Welsh. The origin of the name itself is deserving of explanation. Its literal translation is habitat or place, but what it actually means is the place of your multiple belongings. It's this very sense that you're rooted in many different paths which profoundly influence what you are, but of which you can only ever be partially aware. And the reason it's a good name for a complexity model is that's a complex system. Thousands of modulators influence in the development of the system. They influence what you are, but you can never fully know what they are. A couple of key points to make about the model. First of all, it's a sense-making model, not a categorization model. And the difference there is key. A categorization model is a classic 2x2 matrix that you see in consultancy handbooks. And in those models, the framework precedes the data. As a result of which, it's very fast because we can just drop the data into the appropriate box and decide accordingly. The danger is that actually we won't see subtle differences until they're too late, so we'll be caught out. Right? So categorization is good for exploitation. It's pretty poor for exploration or during periods of change. A sense-making framework, on the other hand, the data precedes the framework. The patterns or the framework itself emerges from the data in a social process. Now, for the purpose of this brief explanation, I'm going to treat it as a set of categories, but that's an important distinction. Categorization models, framework precedes data. Sense-making models, data precedes framework. And of course, one can become the other, and we'll need resetting from time to time. We take the three basic systems here: ordered systems, complex systems, chaotic systems. We create a new category called disorder, and we divide order into two, simple and complicated. In the simple domain, this is an ordered system. That means the relationship between cause and effect exists, is predictable, it can be determined in advance. In simple order, that relationship is self-evident to any reasonable person, as a result of which the decision model is sense, categorize, respond. We see what's coming in, we make it fit previously determined categories, we decide what to do. The model here is that we apply best practice, a phrase which is legitimate in this domain, but illegitimate in other domains. In the complicated domain, there is a relationship between cause and effect, there is a right answer, but it's not self-evident. So I either have to deploy an analytical method, hence sense, analyze, respond, or call in experts who've built expertise within that domain who can make the right decision. Accordingly, I don't apply best practice, I apply good practice. A distinction between good and best practice is actually quite important. In a complicated domain, there are several different ways of doing things, all of which legitimate if you have the right expertise. And trying to force people to adopt one of them is actually quite dangerous. It will basically piss people off, to be honest, to the point where they won't apply best practice where it should be applied. Right? So simple and complicated we're familiar with. Sense, categorize, respond. Sense, analyze, respond. Best practice or good practice. Complexity, on the other hand, is a system without causality. It's a system of like constraints on agents. Agents modify the system. So our decision model here is probe, sense, respond. We conduct safe-fail experiments. We don't do fail-safe design. If an experiment succeeds, we amplify it. If an experiment starts to fail, we dampen it. In fact, we shouldn't even do an experiment unless we've identified our amplification and dampening strategies in advance. And of course, what happens here is we get emergent order, i.e. something which comes out of it is emergent practice, it's a new way of doing things, it's novel, it may be some combination, but it's different and it's unique. In a chaotic environment, if we enter it deliberately, it's for innovation. But if we enter it accidentally, then we need to stabilize the position quickly. So the decision model is act, sense, respond. We move very quickly to stabilize the situation. Any practice will be completely novel in terms of the way things work. Now you'll notice that gives us a very easy way of deciding how to work, but it gives us a divergent. We sometimes call this requisite applicability. It basically says, dependent on which space you're in, you should think differently, you should analyze differently, rather than a one-size-fits-all, which has been the tradition of management theory. Now the central space disorder, and this is key, is the space of not knowing which of the domains you're in. And that's where we are most of the time. And the trouble then is we will interpret the situation according to our personal preference for action. Now, the danger is if you spend 2 or 3 years of your life in a purely bureaucratic, process-based role, then you tend to see all problems as a failure of process. If you're a deep expert, then any problem is a failure to give you enough time or resource to do analysis. Natural complexity workers, battlefield commanders, politicians, their reaction to a crisis is to get lots of different people together from lots of different backgrounds in a desperate hope that somebody will come up with the right solution. That's actually quite a good strategy. And of course, the fascists love a crisis because then they can be given absolute command of everybody who has to do what they're told. So what you get in a normal decision environment is that people are in the disordered space assessing the situation according to their preference for action. One of the main functions of the Cynefin Framework is to allow people to say, hang on a minute, it's complex, therefore we probe, or hang on a minute, that's complicated, which expert shall we bring to bear? Another key aspect of the Cynefin Framework, which is frequently missed off by people who try and oversimplify it, is the boundary between simple and chaotic is different from the other boundaries. It's actually represented in the Harvard Business Review article as a cliff, or in other articles as a symbolic type of wave at the bottom. Yeah? The principle here is if you start to believe that things are simple, you start to believe that they're ordered, you start to believe in your own myths, you start to believe that past success means you're invulnerable to future failure, you effectively move to the complacent zone, which is the boundary between simple and chaotic, and you fall over the edge in a crisis. Right? All the other boundaries allow for transitions. For this, you fall over the edge and recovery is very, very expensive. It therefore follows that you should manage in the complicated and complex spaces and only move a very small amount of material down into the simple, because that's actually highly vulnerable to rapid or accelerated change. So the Cynefin Framework is a decision framework. It's an analytical framework. It's been used for decision theory, it's been used for knowledge management, it's been used for IT design, for project management, because it recognizes the causal differences that exist between different types of system and gives people a very quick and easy way to flip between them so they can use the appropriate method for the appropriate domain.